Okay, so I have two drafts of an analytical writing that I've done about the poem Aunt Jennifer's Tigers, and this is my first draft here, so I'm going to blow that up and show you some things that I like about this and some things that I know I want to edit moving forward. And in this draft, I'm looking at the literary element symbolism, and I'm analyzing a theme from the poem. And so I'll kind of talk you through how I got to that theme and how I developed this paragraph, and then I'll talk about the things that I want to change in the next draft. So, reading the poem, I noticed the symbolism of the wedding band right away because I know that wedding rings are symbolic in the real world, and obviously that's quite a bit of background knowledge that I'm thinking about these days. And then I noticed the part of the poem that stuck out to me the most was this situation that Aunt Jennifer's in, this role of the wife. And I knew that it was bad, but I had to really think about what her life was like according to the poem for probably about 5 or 10 minutes before I was able to put together the theme. I had to really think about, well, why is she in such a bad situation, and what's really the purpose of this poem? What are they talking about for Aunt Jennifer? So I came up with this introduction and thesis statement. In the poem Aunt Jennifer's Tigers, Adrienne Rich tells the story of a woman trapped in a forbidding marriage through the eyes of a couple's niece. Rich uses the symbol of a wedding band to reveal how subservient the role of wife can be for some women and how oppressive it can feel to suffer in silence. And again, I really had to read the poem a few times and think about the situation that Aunt Jennifer was in to come up with this idea of subservience and to come up with this idea of her suffering in silence. And I like the thesis statement, so I'm going to leave that alone. I don't like my introduction because I feel like I could probably tell the reader a little bit more about the poem before jumping into the analysis. It's not absolutely necessary, but I think that it would give a little bit better background. So I'm going to add a comment over here and just say, could be developed to give more background. Okay. So moving on to the second paragraph, I have my topic sentence here. Rich uses symbolism to show how subservient the role of wife can be. And if you'll notice, that's kind of a restating of part of my thesis statement. And that works for the function of organizing your writing, but it's not very interesting for readers to read the same kind of sentence or the same thing over and over again. And if you'll see, I have a third paragraph, which was optional for you. I did add a third paragraph, and it has a very similar topic sentence as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and comment on that I want to have, I want to say this in a different way. All right. The next thing that I notice in here, actually, that is for this part. The next thing that I noticed when I reread this that I wanted to change is the way that I introduced the quote. I just said, in the poem it says. And that conveys to the reader that I'm talking about something in the poem, and it conveys that I'm about to talk about a quote. But again, it's not a very interesting way to introduce the quote, and it's not, I think that I can introduce the quote a little bit better. And this is something that I've seen in maybe 5 students writing, but not very many people are doing this, what's called embedding the quote. So I'm going to say over here, try to embed the quote rather than just dropping it in. And I will show you in the second draft how I did that. But basically, I want the quote to kind of flow into a sentence that's just talking about the poem instead of just dropping it and saying, it says this. So then my analysis, a wedding ring typically represents the commitment between spouses, and the shape of the ring itself symbolizes their endless fidelity. Aunt Jennifer's wedding ring, which sits heavily upon Aunt Jennifer's hand, symbolizes a shackle binding Jennifer to her husband instead. So I'm analyzing the symbol. I'm talking about how this wedding ring kind of has a different symbol than wedding rings usually do. That analysis is pretty strong. In my second draft, I kind of develop it a little bit more and look at a second literary element, but that's just something I saw as I dug a little deeper. So this analysis is fine. I'll show you in the second draft how I kind of added on to it a little bit. And again, I would want to look back at my topic sentence here and try to say that in a little bit of a different way. Make that a little smaller so we can see the commentary. So my third stanza, in the third stanza, Rich uses symbolism again to show how subservient the role of wife can be. This stanza says, her terrified hands will lie, still ringed with ordeals she was mastered by. And that word mastered really caught me as I read the poem, and that's kind of how I figured out this subservient role of the wife that I put back up into the thesis statement. So then my analysis there, in these lines, the ring is further developed as a symbol of Jennifer's servitude, which can be seen in the word mastered. In the word terrified, the reader sees the oppressive effect of this unequal marriage on Jennifer. And then, of course, I'm restating one of the words from my thesis statement to kind of ground my commentary. So it's good sometimes to refer back to parts of your writing, just not restating whole sentences like I did with my topic sentences. Okay, so now I think I'm ready to move to the second draft, and I'll sort of talk through how I figured out what I did there. Okay, so I developed my introduction a little bit. I have, in the poem Aunt Jennifer's Tigers, Adrienne Rich tells the story of a woman trapped in a forbidding marriage through the eyes of a couple's niece, and I had that in my first draft. And then I added a second sentence just to tell the reader a little bit more about the flow of the poem and how the story is revealed. The niece doesn't notice her aunt's dilemma at first, instead focusing on the brilliant tigers the aunt has woven into a screen. So that just tells the reader a little bit about the order that the information is presented in the poem in case they haven't read it, which some of you haven't read this poem. And of course, you're welcome to look it up. It should be the first Google result if you wanted to read the poem while you're looking at this writing. Rich uses the symbol. Okay, so I didn't change my thesis statement at all. I left it the same. One thing I changed is my topic sentence here, and I tried to just let the reader know where I'm talking about in the poem, and I tried to restate parts of my thesis statement without saying them in the exact same words. So I changed it to the wedding ring first appears in the second stanza, and Rich develops it as a symbol throughout the second and third stanza. So if I look back at my original, I said in the third stanza, Rich uses symbolism again, or Rich uses symbolism to show how subservient the role of wife can be. So by identifying a place in the poem that I'm talking about, I kind of mixed up the writing a little bit here. And then embedding the quote. That's what I did here when I said, readers see the aunt weaving and struggling to pull the needle before realizing that it is the massive weight of Uncle's wedding band that has caused her to falter. So I'm still using that quote, the massive weight of Uncle's wedding band, but I have embedded that quote into a sentence. Instead of presenting you with a piece of textual evidence, I'm just telling you a little bit about what's happening in the poem, and then I'm using a quote to tell part of that. So I'm just sort of exposing the reader to what's going on in the middle of the poem using a quote. And that way it seems a lot more conversational, and as you read the analysis, it's easier to kind of read it and it flows better. By using the word massive, Rich is clearly drawing attention to this ring, and the word weight shows readers that it is a burden of some kind. And I noticed as I was kind of drilling down into this quote a little bit more that it wasn't just the symbolism of the wedding band that struck me, but the words that she chose, and the fact that she said massive weight sort of gave away that this was a negative symbol. And so I realized that I couldn't really look at the symbolism without also looking at the diction. And I lied earlier. I said I didn't change my thesis statement. I did go back up and add the symbol of a wedding band and the diction describing it. So I realized in order to analyze one literary element, I kind of had to look at another one too. Let's see. Then you can see in my third paragraph, my topic sentence is changed again to be a little bit less formulaic and look a little bit less like the thesis statement. And again, I identified the place in the poem that I'm talking about. In the third stanza, Rich reveals more about the relationship between Jennifer and her husband and its effects on Jennifer through the continued development of the ring as a symbol. So I'm still talking about this effect. I'm still talking about the relationship, those thematic ideas. I'm still mentioning the symbol, but I'm kind of presenting it by talking about where in the poem I'm moving to, and I'm just trying to tell the story of the poem to the reader. And that makes it, I think, easier and more enjoyable to read. The poem jumps forward in time to Aunt Jennifer's death, when it is revealed that her terrified hands will lie still ringed with ordeals she was mastered by. And again, here I embedded the quote into this sentence, that I'm just telling the reader the story of the poem and then using this quote to highlight the part that I'm focusing on. In these lines, the ring is further developed as a symbol of Jennifer's servitude, which can be seen in the word mastered. Again, I'm looking at the diction as a way of developing a symbol. In the word terrified, the reader sees the oppressive effect of this unequal marriage on Jennifer. And again, I'm using that same, I left this sentence the same. I'm talking about the oppressive effect of the marriage, and that ties back to the word oppressive and the role of the wife in my theme. So this draft, which I actually wrote first, and then I kind of scaled it back for my first draft. This draft took me about 45 minutes to write, and I have a degree in English. So I don't expect your writing to look like this, but this is kind of like an optimal, ideally, your writing can look like this if you're looking at literary elements and how they develop themes in poems. And I wanted to talk you through how I got from a first draft, theoretically, to a second draft. And I wanted to highlight for you specifically the editing of the topic sentences, the introduction, and embedding those quotes rather than just dropping them in. So I want you to choose one of those things that you're going to develop. I would love for you to focus on embedding the quotes. I think that's something that we all need to work towards, but I'm asking you to look at a lot in this video. So choose whether you're going to make your introduction really strong, or you're going to vary your topic sentences, or if you're going to work on embedding your quotes rather than just dropping them into the writing. Choose one of those and work with a partner to kind of peer review and suggest some things to each other. And then I want you to have a second draft of your analytical paragraph. And of course, you need to save the first draft and then save the second draft separately so that I can see kind of the growth in your writing through that editing process. I hope you guys have a great Thursday and Friday. I'll see you Monday.